just welcome everybody here. Thanks for coming. This is something that we're going to be trying to do more of, these kind of events where we sort of pick up on topics and talk at kind of a higher level about topics around education and more specifically public education. So I thank you for coming to sort of one of our first events and we test this space. So there was actually some questions about doing this live, and we said, let's not try to introduce anything more to this. Let's just try and do it in a way that just benefits all of our people in our community. Just real quick, tonight's topic is about school funding. We're going to look at it from a high level. We're going to talk about funding models, sort of things that are impacting school funding in the state and locally, federally. We're going to look at all those pieces. And really, it's about trying to create a familiarity with the things that are going to be brought up in different organizations or different school districts in town. We do have the benefit of some folks here, and I'll be introducing them shortly. But just so you know, that's kind of where we're rounding this out. It's in the high-level view. We won't be getting into very specifics about our Suburban Unified, but they are here in order to help us better understand how decisions are made and what kind of things are impacting local schools. So without any further information, I'll introduce myself. My name is Matt Gradias. I'm the board president for the Santa Barbara Education Foundation. I'm a fifth generation from Santa Barbara. I went to Harding School, La Cumbre Junior High, and Santa Barbara High School, and City College, and then went up to Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. So I am a Don, the best school in town. So, but I'll introduce the folks here. I'm going to just start at this table. Jack O'Connell, there you go, is the first. His first election was to Santa Barbara County School Board in 1982. He was elected to the California State Assembly, representing portions of Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. In 1994, Jack won the state Senate seat that added all of Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. He actually came to our house when he was running for that seat, and my parents and talked to them, so that was kind of nice. In 2002, Jack was elected to the California's 26th Superintendent of Public Instruction. He is the founding partner in the firm Capital Advisors that helps meet the needs of our students. Next to him is Barrett Snider. Barrett has spent 25 years working in California politics and is a founding partner at Capital Advisors Group. He is an expert on issues affecting California's education system and has served as a consultant for school agencies, statewide associations, and nonprofits and Fortune 500 companies. In the middle over there is Dr. Hilda Maldonado, and a longtime bilingual educator and student advocate. Dr. Maldonado began her career as an educator 32 years ago in LA Unified School District. 35 years ago. All right.
That's counting her first 12 as a student.
Yeah. She has progressed to become that district's associate superintendent before becoming the second female and first Latina to serve as superintendent of the Santa Barbara Unified School District in 2020. Next to her is Gabe Escobedo. Gabe is a higher education and civic leader with over a decade of experience in student affairs, public governance, equity-focused institutional change. At UC Santa Barbara, he works with the Division of Student Affairs and oversees student and youth programs. He has served as the chair of the City of Santa Barbara's Planning Commission, fun job, and Community Formation Commission, and is currently president of the Santa Barbara Unified School District Board. Next to him, or next to Hilda, is Dr. Pedro Paz. Pedro is the executive director of the Santa Barbara Education Foundation, where he leads initiatives aimed at promoting educational equity and fostering community collaboration. He holds his PhD in education from UC Santa Barbara, go Gauchos, and has extensive experience in program evaluation as well as training and presenting on educational development. He has worked across several organizations in grant administration and program evaluation, including First Five and the Santa Barbara Foundation. So, we're going to get started tonight with a couple of items. We're going to have a couple of brief presentations, and out of those presentations, we'll have some questions, and then we'll open up to the audience for some questions too. So I'm going to start by introducing Jack and Barrett to talk about federal and state funding.
Great. Matt, thanks for the invitation to be here and to participate. And for me, it's a homecoming. And so it's nice to be able to come to a facility where you don't need directions, where you don't have somebody on your phone telling you where to go. And when they just say, 1200 State Street, you know exactly where it is. So since I used to have an office right down the street here. But it's nice to be home and see so many friends and people here that have done so much. I mean, in education, educators, foundation, support, policy. It's just really nice to be here. And then Barrett is one of the founding partners to our firm, Capital Advisors, as well. And Barrett's continuing a tradition. In all my years representing this beautiful area, not one person ever told me, no, they're not going to come to Santa Barbara. In fact, you know what people used to say? Please make it a Monday or a Friday. I don't know why, but that was the same thing when Hilda invited Barrett and me to be here. Barrett, I think, RSVP'd before I could. And so it's nice to be here. We did something, we Zoomed with you and your board, I think, in late January or early February. And that really got started here as well. So I'll keep my remarks, Matt, down to about 4 hours, if that's okay with you. It's a short one. It's a short one tonight. Give you the abbreviated version. From the Sacramento perspective, and Washington, D.C. a little bit, Barrett's going to do. If I were going to try to characterize 2 words for you for the next year, maybe 18 months, it's uncertainty and unpredictable. And then think about where we were a couple of years ago. You might remember the governor presented a budget, and he said we're $38 billion, looking at $38 billion deficit. And the legislative analysts, independent, objective, nonpartisan, said, actually, Governor, it's $68 billion short. And then 1 month after that, 2 years ago, the January revenue came in $5 billion below. So the LAO said, you're actually about $73 billion short. Now, what really attributed to that, it's not the governor's fault, it's not finance, it's not our friends in the legislature. We didn't pay our taxes on April 15th. It was all postponed until October 15th. And then October 15th came, if you remember, and we got another 30-day delay till November 15th. We could never figure out why that delay. And the reason I wanted to say, and we got that delay because of flooding in the state. 99% of us, 55 of the 58 counties, didn't have to pay taxes for another 6 months. And so the legislature had to pass a budget, and frankly, they had no idea how much money would be coming in. So why do I want to start out by mentioning that? Because this year, about 20%, a little more than 20% of the state did not have to pay their taxes on April 15th because of the devastating fires in Los Angeles. So it's going to be another round of guesstimates and they don't like to use that term, the economists up there, that some of our friends, but they really don't know how much money is going to be coming in. I mean, next to the Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, the largest amount of dough flowing into the state general fund is from that Los Angeles area. So we're not really sure. And then the property taxes, you talk about like your community funded districts, they really are in the dark, because their taxes aren't going to be due, and I'm not going to misspeak here, until April of 2026. So talk about really trying to make an accurate guesstimate. That's what you're looking at. We are so dependent in education on our economy. I've probably met 10 or 12 people in my career, and thank you for sending me to Sacramento and giving me a career, that have really understand all the intricacies of Prop 98. And that was the ballot measure that passed in 1988, June. I remember being here and supporting it and voting for it, doing the press conference for it. And it's pre-K through grades 14, includes our friends at community colleges. And I've met about 10 or 12 people in my career that know all those intricacies. I just defend it. I don't try to understand it. I just defend it. But Barrett's one of the 10 that really understands all the intricacies from the state perspective, from the local perspective. So the ruling here, Matt was supposed to say, any technical questions go to Barrett, the easy softballs go to Jack. But we are dependent on the economy because we want that 40% to be 40% of a larger number. And so we really do focus on things like inflation. And inflation right now is fairly well under control, 2.4%. We focus on unemployment.
and unemployment in the country, and I verified all this morning, is 4.2%, and for the state of California, a little higher, about 5.3%. One of our founding partners is a real economist and taught economics, and we talk with him, and he says, basically, for full employment, anything under 5%, you're in pretty good shape. And we're now at 5.3%. So a little bit of a concern. Job growth, the last report was fairly healthy. I always look at construction and home purchases. And that's really important when you're a community-funded district. And they're both down slightly statewide because we like it when homes or big buildings or shopping centers change hands because under Prop 13, they get reassessed. So that helps our general fund. That helps our local schools as well. The governor's budget update, the COLA that we use, cost of living adjustment, is from a very well-written law many, many years ago. Whenever I say it's well-written, Barrett just gave away the punchline. Jack wrote it. So when I was working for you, I wrote this law, and what we did is we tried to find the COLA that was the biggest. And Governor Wilson signed it into law. So we use what's known as the implicit price deflator, comes out 4 times a year from U.S. Department of Commerce. Is it linked to our direct costs here? Not 1 inch. But it was the highest we could find. And it's actually a market basket of goods and services nationally, primarily by cities and counties. But we wanted to find the highest COLA because at the time when we're doing revenue limits, and we've talked about that, that's exactly what we wanted. So the new COLA, when the governor did the budget in January, he said, we're looking at about 2.43. Inflation's down a little. So now the numbers that the governor is going to release next week is at 2.3 because that's what we follow. One exciting element of the budget that will help Santa Barbara is there's money for discretionary block grant. The governor has in his January budget $1.8 billion, and it will come out on a per student basis. So it's about $325 per student. We're hoping that he increases that number. He had also in the budget about $1.6 billion unallocated within Prop 98. We were hoping that might get folded in. And that would increase that number, and that's where people need help for. So that's important. What are your challenges, and where would that money go? STRS and PERS. PERS is the second largest retirement system that we have here in the country, second only to Social Security. And then STRS is right up there. And Governor Brown increased public entities percentage about 10, 12 years ago. It was like a 34-year plan. So I always tell my friends, if you can just get to the year 2046, you'll be fine. But that was an issue that Governor Brown put money in for to help school districts and cities and counties. Newsom did the first couple of years, but he hasn't now for about 4 years, 5 years, and he hasn't this year. So you're on the hook for that, and that's a real challenge as well. The utility costs, we're Edison here, correct? They've already been approved by the PUC for increases. Guess who's going to end up paying for that? Real shock to you, your insurance is going up, particularly fire. As a result of the tragedies in LA. Your health costs are going up. Barrett's going to talk about the federal cuts that we're looking at. Those are real, that we're looking at as well. And then not all of our categorical programs receive a COLA. And that's something people don't talk about. Another very well-written bill many years ago that I had that didn't get through the legislature would have provided the COLA to all our categorical programs. In fact, the year I did that and I did the other COLA, my nickname in Sacramento was Jack O'Cola for a while. But that's something else that you're on the hook for, and the state's not helping you with for that. Another bill I wanted to mention, and Barrett's going to go into a little more detail, he worked on it as recently as this morning, is Assembly Bill 1391 by a good friend of Assemblyman Greg Hart. The two of them helped form this coastal caucus for mid-state. And Dawn Addis has the bill that would help fund TK for our community-funded schools. When the governor and people in Sacramento say, well, it's TK for all, full funding for all, that's not accurate, friends, because they purposely excluded basic age school districts, community funded districts. And so we don't do that for meals. We don't do that for anything else. And so this is an equity argument that we need to make. And the bill, Barrett's going to give you the update on that because he's been working on it big time. But we really need, if you have contacts with California Teachers Association or School Boards Association and the CSEA, School Employees, we need their Sacramento operations in support. We call it Mothership CTA, the Sacramento guys. They have to be able to sign up and help that get that passed. And then the governor's pet projects, expect him to fully fund. He believes in TK, and for some reason, they excluded community funded districts. He's a big believer in universal meals, 2 meals a day. We're going to serve about 1 billion meals this year in California to school kids, and that's very healthy. Adam Schiff, our U.S. Senator and my former roommate in Sacramento, called about 2 weeks ago. He was doing testimony in support of the meals program, and he wanted some stories quickly from me. It calls on a Sunday night. And I said, well, I can remember being in Humboldt as state superintendent on a Friday afternoon at elementary school looking at some project or program, and kids were getting on the bus and they were giving them 2 sack lunches. One were labeled Saturday, one was labeled Sunday. And the superintendent told me the most healthy, nutritious meals these kids get come from the schools. And then the ELOP program is important to the governor, the extended learning, $4.435 billion as well. I'm going to close. The superintendent asked me to just mention for 30 seconds a little bit on facilities. Thank you, Santa Barbara, for helping pass Prop 2. That was a $10 billion school bond measure. It's K through community colleges. I saw some of the private polling, and CSU and UC heard us, so they excluded it this time. When that measure was on the ballot in 2020, the governor wanted to have K through university. I saw the same polling. It cost us then 4 points, and the measure got 47% of the vote. So this time they said, let's exclude CSU and UC. Reasons I don't understand costs us. But what's important to an aging educational infrastructure district like Santa Barbara is modernization money. This had $4 billion in it. Most of it's committed, some to the fire to rebuild Palisades, Pasadena, Altadena. There's also a couple of cookie jars in there I wanted to mention. $600 million for career tech. There's $600 million for charter schools. And there's a $700 million set aside for small school districts. You're way too big for that. But that's in there as well. And then they did tinker with the distribution formula a little bit so that your unduplicated kids, if you have a lot of them, you'll get a little bit more money on the match from the state versus your obligation. And then the last thing I'm going to mention is the local school bonds that pass. And there's probably nobody that follows this more closely than me, because again, when you were so helpful and voting for me, the thing I'm actually most proud about my work in Sacramento is we lowered the vote threshold so that you don't need 2/3 vote of the local community to pass it. You're at 55%. So next time you guys try to pass a school bond, I already got you 12% from 6%. And I'll give you the numbers on this because I actually follow it. I guess I don't have much to do. Barrett lets me do this. We had on the ballot in November 267 local school bond measures. 204 of them passed, 63 failed. And what's remarkable to our efforts from the 67 to 55, remember I mentioned that 204 passed, 151 of those 204 passed, they got between the 55% and 67%. I wish I got a commission on some of these for that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, another potential difficult way to generate money locally is a parcel tax. And we had 26 on the ballot last time, 24 to 26 passed. And that can be used for operational, where the school bonds are facilities, but that's hard because it's 2/3 vote. I mean, our good friend Gary Hart tried for several years to lower that 67%, and we weren't successful. But that's an option for school districts to consider. But it's tough when you're declining enrollment and aging population in that. So with that, Barrett, we're going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. So Jack teed up a lot of the economic information that's really driving. I'm going to start with what's going on with the state budget. We're kind of in the crunch time. And just to sort of say up here at the front that, local school districts throughout the state, California's education finance system is different than a lot of other states. All that school districts have to operate is what the state of California gives them in terms of allowable funding. And a lot of other states, school boards at the local level have the ability to raise local revenue to pay people more money. And in California, we don't have that system, mostly because of Prop 13 and some other dynamics I'm not going to get into. But so we pay a lot of attention to what's going on with the state's economy, what's going on with revenue, and then Proposition 98, which is this constitutional funding formula that dictates our money for public education, spits out these numbers every year. And so we're always constantly, what's going on with that? And then what's peculiar about this year is that we suspended Prop 98 last year. And that's really important to keep track of, because when they suspend Prop 98, they keep track of the suspension. So if they owed us, I'm going to use fake numbers, but $100 billion, and they suspend it to 80, that 20 that they suspend, they keep track of that. They owe us that money. And there's a formula in the Constitution that says when new money comes into the state's general fund that's higher than we expected, you're required to give that new money to the school people. Why I say that is because right now we're seeing that play out. If you guys have been tracking monthly revenue for the last couple of months, it's been really good news. The state has exceeded their revenue expectations every month.
4 billion.
But we're about 4 billion up right now after April. And so, us budget nerds are going, this is going to be relational. Well, so now I'm going to bring in what's going on broadly in the economy with tariffs and the looming potential of federal cuts. So the state right now, if you look at what's going on, it's looking great. We got $4 billion more than we thought, but a lot of that's 2024 money, right? Those are people paying taxes on last year's economy and everything that was going on then. What we're starting to see are in like sales and use tax and some of these other real-time indicators is that things are slowing down. And there's a lot of economists that are saying, we're in for some rough road here. The Fed came out just yesterday, said we're not going to raise rates. We're seeing inflationary dynamics out there. So a lot of the optimism looking in the past is shifting going forward to be a little bit more pessimistic. And why that all matters is that on Wednesday, the governor is going to release a revised budget for the state, and it's going to include new numbers for Prop 98 and new numbers for what folks out in the field can expect. What we think is going to happen and what we're hearing is going to happen is that they're going to recognize the fact that the state revenue picture is not as good. They're going to have to do some calculations about what they think the tariff impacts are. We're a little curious about how they're going to do that. But it's not going to be as good. It'll be good in the short term because, like I mentioned, the money's been coming in. What we're worried about is where they count the money in which fiscal year. If they count the money in 23, 24, that's a little bit of what we would call a manipulation of Prop 98. Because if the money doesn't show up in 24, 25, they don't actually owe us that differential. And so what we're banking on is this maintenance factor up. This is the $20 billion amount that I was telling you. It's not 20, it's actually 8. But that amount of money changes depending on which fiscal year they count the money in. Well, it's a little bit of a black box. Department of Finance at the state level, they get the money. We can't really see, no one can really see what fiscal year you accrue that money to. So there's a little bit of a sort of humming and hawing over. The non-school side of the budget is facing significant reductions. If you look at the potential cut to Medicaid at the federal level, that is to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. And by the way, what I'm talking about, so first there's 2 steps here. Revenue just generally is probably going to go down for the state. And the second stage is what are the potential cuts to federal programs that we're using federal money to pay for currently that's going to get backed out. And so that's why folks are paying so much attention to what's going on in Congress right now. Medicaid is a big one. Some consolidation. It looks like a lot of the cuts to education portions of the federal budget are on the higher ed side, student loans, but also some consolidation. Head Start, which is a great program, so far has dodged what a lot of folks thought was a cut, but AmeriCorps programs are being slashed. already. There's just a couple of us. But none of it's sorted out yet. We don't know what's going on at the federal level. So what the state's doing and what local districts are having to do is, if I've got positions that are funded, for example, out of Head Start, if I got all these people, I got to pass a budget now, but I don't know if Congress is going to pay for. So that's playing out across all kinds of different pots of money. There's not a ton of Head Start money in Santa Barbara, but I'm using it as an example. In some districts, it's a lot. I was in Santa Clara County the other day, and that's a big deal for them, right? So it's on Jack's point, uncertainty. We just don't know how that's going to play out. We don't know how the tariffs are how much longer that's going to go on. What's that going to do to the economy? And California's economy in particular is being impacted. So if you look at agricultural sectors, if you look at Hollywood, if you look at some of these places that are hotbeds, they're big areas for California's economy. And so we will know a whole lot more on Wednesday, what's going on with that. I did want to talk about AB 1391, which is being carried by Assemblymember Addis, and I testified on the bill last week. It would do for Santa Barbara and other districts that are funded locally with property tax exclusively. They were left out of the TK program. When we expanded transitional kindergarten, they increased the Prop 98 guarantee to account for all the new 4-year-olds in the system. But then they distributed that money through the local control funding formula. Well, Santa Barbara and about 130 or so of your colleagues around the state don't receive LCFF money because you get all of your money from your local property tax. I also represent small school districts, and there are a bunch of necessary small, super tiny, super rural districts. They're not funded out of LCF either, but they have kids that want to go to TK. So there's a couple buckets of LEAs, and so Santa Barbara's supporting that bill. We're working on that. That would be a lot of money if we could secure that passage. So I know we're running out of time, but I'm happy to also take questions on any of these too.
Mention Prop 28 1 second.
Oh, so Prop 28, art and music. That's a challenge, and we were talking about this a little bit before. So Prop 28 is the art and music initiative that we passed. It's about $1 billion statewide of new Prop 98 money. They grew the Prop 98 pot. It goes to schools all across the state. You have to spend it on art and music. And if you're over 500 ADA, which Santa Barbara certainly is, you have to spend 80% of that money on new art and music program stuff, people. And only 20% of it can be spent on stuff. Well, if you're a district like Santa Barbara, which I know you guys have just for years invested in arts, you can't use any of that money to support existing program. It's a rule. And what's really difficult about this is why Jack and I always, when we talk about people going to the ballot with stuff, we're like, don't go to the ballot. Because when we pass a law at the ballot, the legislature cannot amend it. So what we find is that there's like definition problems or there's statute issues that if we could clarify this piece, what does supplement, not supplant mean? What is art and music? Where at what point is it not art or music? That there's just some issues there, but the legislature and the governor have no ability to affect that. We have to go back to the voters. So that's creating all kinds of implementation issues around the state. It's great to have the money. It's a great idea, but the implementation of it's just been a challenge. I know we've been talking about that a little bit. So
Thank you guys very much for that. Next, we're going to have Hilda talk a little bit about our kind of local funding and budget process.
Well, first of all, can we thank Barrett and Jack for being here with us? I know it was a big trek, but we're so happy. They are capital advisors in our school district, contracts with obviously people a lot more in tune to what's happening at the state and federal level to advise us on things that are coming down or things to think about as we develop our budget and policy and bills and everything else related to public education and funding. So we're really pleased to have you and have you back, of course, Jack. I will say the one certainty that is in place is that we're going to have kids and teachers in classrooms and that we need to feed them and that we need to support them and we need to take care of them. So that I can bring to you for certain. And I remember being a brand new teacher, meeting the state superintendent many, many years ago, now when I was 12. But I asked him, so what do you do? And that was a very innocent question, but now I know. And I think that, I still went back to my classroom and it didn't affect me because I still taught kids the next day. And so that's one certainty that we can offer in Santa Barbara Unified. And I'm glad we ended with Prop 28 money because I know it's been a big conversation in our community. Santa Barbara, before I arrived, maybe even before many of us, and I know I want to welcome also Bill Banning, our other trustee who's here, who was a Goleta Union superintendent, invest in 68 positions across the TK-12 system already. So we have 30 teachers in the 9 elementary schools for arts and music, and 38 across the 8 junior high and high schools. So that's been a well-established investment in our general fund that precedes us. That just shows the commitment that Santa Barbara has had, and it has been challenging for us to figure out, how do we add more? Is there more classrooms? Can we add more minutes to the day? How do we get more kids in there? So we're trying to get very creative with how to do that, but that is a big challenge for Santa Barbara Unified. And I think we're going to get there. We're just going to have to figure out how to do that better. I did give everybody a handout because at the heart of it all, I'm always going to be a teacher. So I hope you can just follow. I was asked to talk a little bit about how we develop our budget. What does it mean? What does it look like? So there's some handouts in the back, and the pages are numbered. So we're going to start with page 1, which is basically, how do we start with how to set up our budget? In Santa Barbara Unified, I also like to use an acronym because that's what helps me remember how we do our business. I use the ABCs because I was also a reading teacher. And the ABCs, basically the A's are academics, athletics, the arts, and activities or clubs. That is what we deliver on. B is for belonging and wellness. We know that many of our students need to feel like they belong in the schools and that they're socially, emotionally healthy and have a lot of things that are happening provided to them for their well-being. And C is for our culture, our climate, and our community. We know that part of running a school district is that we do it in community, for community, with community. So that's what we use to sort of think about how we frame what we're doing when we make decisions around our budget, when we make decisions around our programming, when we make decisions about how we're going to just basically run the district. So I hope that helps. My little acronym, there will not be a test, but I do want you to know when we organize people, time, and money, that's what we look at. Starting with our page 1, then you'll notice that our student enrollment is 11,980 students. That they're looking for the one-sheeters. So if you don't have the one-sheeter, you're not following along. And I'll wait. See, I'm going to use my teacher time, and right here, Nina, on the front. Yeah. Thank you, Nina. So as was stated earlier, we are in declining enrollment, pretty much in line with what the state is having in terms of like a 3% declining enrollment. Sometimes you'll hear people say people are leaving because, we're not doing a good job. But really, it's in line with the state. And when we looked at data, we were just with Peter Rupert this weekend. Peter Rupert, our local economist at UCSB, has looked at the families that are leaving our district are between the grades 4th and 8th grade, which is really, 9, 10-year-olds to just about 13-year-olds. He didn't explain why or how, but many of those families are moving to like the Imperial County area and places like that. And he has more data to track that. But we do recognize that that's where we're having a little bit of a loss in enrollment in our district because half of our students, or two-thirds of the students in Santa Barbara Unified are in the high schools. 3 comprehensive high schools plus an alternative high school. So 2/3 of the students are in the high schools. So when you imagine athletics programs, arts programs, academics, getting them ready for college and career, our budget has to really address the fact that we are mostly a high school district. We have 4 feeder elementary school districts, Montecito, Cold Springs, Hope, and Goleta. They have their kids come to us in 7th to 12th grade. Our junior high schools are only 7th and 8th grade. So that's another part of how we distribute money and people in buildings. That's what we have to think about. Conversations we're having internally are, should we be maybe having 6th graders go to junior high school and have a 6 to 8 span? Or have 9th grade come back down to the junior high? And those are conversations for the future, but things for us to think about. And I don't know how many of you knew that, but we're largely a high school district. So that really matters when we distribute money.
And I just want to add on it.
Yeah.
2/3 of the school districts are in declining enrollment. So you
2/3 of
2/3
California school
statewide.
districts.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we're not alone. Next to, right below our student enrollment, you'll see that I have a breakdown of who are the students that then are in our school district. 13.5% are students with disabilities. 61.1% are socioeconomically disadvantaged or low-income family students. 15% are students that I like to call bilingual, like myself, but we call them emergent multilingual learners. 28% of them become proficient in our school system. That's why you see those two numbers next to each other. 8.3% are homeless, and about 0.1% are fostering youth. So when you think about when we're putting together a budget and the needs that these students have, the state calls them unduplicated count students. To the right of that, you'll see something called Local Control Accountability Plan. It looks a little bit like a reverse Pokemon. When we take our budget, the state, even though we're community funded, requires us to take a percent or a chunk of that money and set it aside for a local control accountability plan for how are we going to meet the needs of these students that I just talked about. Our students in low income status, students that are learning English, and students who are homeless or with disabilities. Below that, you see a colorful purple July annual budget financial cycle. And I bring that to you because I think it's important for our community to really understand how our budget reporting to our board members looks, and why you'll hear people say, the numbers don't match, they're moving money around. Why is it that our wonderful CBO, Ms. Hernandez, can't keep up with the math? Well, it's not that. It's that actually our budget development starts and gets reported to the board in different stages. So if we start in July, that's the start of the new fiscal year. In September, the board receives a report on the unaudited actuals from the previous school year. So people have seen this new budget, but in September, they're getting a report on last year's budget. And that's just a legal requirement for us as a school district to our board members. In December, we go back to the current year budget and we do what's called the first interim budget. How is how are the expenditures coming along? How are the reserves looking? Do things cost more because of tariffs, or are we saving money? Are utilities costs up? And she reports all of this to the board. In January, we get a first look at the governor's budget for the following school year. And we report that to the board. And we say, here's what the governor's budget's looking like. In February, we start to look at how is the local control accountability plan looking? What are the expenditures? How are kids doing? In March, we go back to do a second interim budget report to the board, to once again go back to what's our current budget looking like? What are the expenditures? How are the revenues looking? How are you thinking about how to now start to plan the next school year's budget? And of course, you heard we start developing our budget in April. We start a little earlier, but we start to really look at numbers solidly. And then in May, we hope and pray and wait for the governor's May revise. Because whatever he said in January always changes by May. Because there's a bunch of people, like our friends here, advocating from January to May for that budget to change. And we're waiting also to see what will the final numbers be. And then in June, we hopefully come with a final budget for the next year. So if you thought that we were a little crazy, you were right, because this is what we have to do. So I'm getting nods. We're getting it. You're seeing it. And it was color coded on purpose so you can see what budget we're bringing each month. And again, we're going to post this on our website with big graphics. So if they're really tiny and you can't see them, like I'm actually having a little trouble seeing it myself, we'll have it on our website and we'll make sure you guys can see it. And then, of course, in the bottom, you'll see, so how many people do we hire? We have regular certificated staff. That's what's called our teaching staff, our teaching workforce. There's 822 teachers. Our classified are food service workers, business office workers, maintenance workers, everybody else was not, and some teacher assistants are in that bucket, and there's 727 people in that. Our nurses, psychologists are also in between these buckets, social workers. 57 people manage the school district that are certificated like myself, and 26 in the classified space. So obviously when we're cooking meals and we're delivering food, we need managers that oversee the people that are doing that work, as well as electricians, plumbers, everybody that's going out. We need managers to oversee their work. So all in all, we have about 1,600, a little more than 1,600 employees. And then of course, we hire a bunch of temporary people that come and do all our athletics programs. Walk-in coaches for football, baseball, depending on the season. And we hire another 893 people to do that work. Those are called temporary employees and our non-unit employees. So that's the front. So when we look at our budget and we sit down to think about so how are we going to do this budget? What are we going to do? We take all of this into consideration. So if you go to the second page, this is where it gets really fun, because as a community funded district, as was said earlier, we basically, and if you have the stapled document that's several pages long, if you want to know about our community funded district, there's a page in there that really explains it a lot better than I probably can now. But basically, the governor sets out what everybody's getting in terms of money, and they look at districts like ours and they say, oh, you already have that base amount of money, so you get to keep your property taxes, we won't give you any more. But we're still held accountable to all the things everybody else has to do. So that's what a community funded district is in the short explanation. We get what's called restricted money and unrestricted money. So on the left side of page 2, you'll see in red, general fund, unrestricted expenditures, and you'll see the categories which we spend that money in. We have salaries and benefits, books and supplies, services and other operating expenditures, capital outlay, contributions that we have to make to special education. If you don't know already, the federal government doesn't fully fund special education, but still expects us to provide it. And we usually have to contribute close to $35 million to that program to actually make it happen. And as you saw earlier, we have 13% of our students who are students with disabilities. And by the way, coming out of COVID, we're seeing a lot more younger students coming from not even in school age, already identified with autism and other learning disabilities. So we're already getting kids coming into the school district with identified disabilities. And on the right-hand side, you'll see general fund restricted expenditures. That's money that's coming to us from the federal and state fund. And again, even though our governor, who we love, is giving us money and we agree should have TK, he doesn't fund it, but we still agree to do it. Particularly in Santa Barbara, as a parent myself, I don't have little kids anymore, but I know how expensive childcare is. So of course we're going to offer TK. We're not going to say no to that. And not only that, we know that every research that we read about early education states the earlier they're in school, the better socialized they are, the more skills they can get. So why wouldn't we do it? But it is costing Santa Barbara Unified $3.6 million to do it. And that means we have to have classrooms, teachers, new materials. The ratio in those classes are 10-1. So we have to have more adults in those programs. So if this AB 1391 passes, we will gain back $3.6 million to our budget that can go to other programs. And you'll see at the bottom, where does the money go? 84% of it goes to salaries and benefits. When we negotiated our union contracts last year, we added contributions to our benefits. When I arrived here, we only paid 40% of the health benefits for our employees. I come from a school district that was 100% benefits paid for me, my husband, and my 2 sons. So when I got here, one of the commitments I made was to really increase how much we contribute towards their benefits. And so the board authorized us to increase it to 75%. So we know that not everybody takes advantage of our benefits plans, but we know that we do contribute a lot more, and that's just better. Healthier employees are going to be better for our school system. So again, 84% goes to salaries and benefits, and the other goes to what I've already read. Our total budget is $264,000, and 264 million. Math is hard sometimes when you're dealing with big numbers. $264 million. 84% is what? Salaries and benefits. But this year, because of that, because of the loss of our federal funds, plus the increase to salaries and benefits, we are looking at a deficit of 35 million that we're trying to plug in the next 2 years, which is why you all hear that we're trying to reduce our budget by 9 million this year, 9.6, next year by 4 million, to be able to stay within our budget that we have. If you look way on the top, we are an AA1 Moody's rated district. That means when we go to sell our bonds, we do really well in the bond market. And we're very proud of that, Kim and I, because we know that we're just one level below the highest rating a school district can get for fiscal responsibility. And then, of course, to the bottom left, you'll see the facilities modernization bonds that are coming to an end in the next couple of years. And we do have aging infrastructure buildings and new buildings that we have built. So those are all things that we also have to look at when we think about all the programs that we invest in. Programs we invest in Santa Barbara, I've already talked about the arts programs, but we also invest a lot in AVID program, which is the program that we use for first-generation college-going students like myself, who really benefit from a lot of great people helping me know how to get to college. We invest in the PEAK program. I see my fellow coworker here, Ms. Dr. Patricia Madrigal. We really believe it's a really good program for getting kids to really just do better in school. And we support college, career, the military, the workforce, wherever kids want to go, but we want them prepared. We know they have to read, they have to be able to do math, they have to be able to read 264 million. And so those are some of the programs along with the arts that we have invested in that we continue to protect in our school district. So that is it. And then of course now we're planning for contingency plans. What will we do if there's a recession? Thank you.
Thanks, Hilda. It's a lot. Gabe, if you want to kind of share kind of the role as a board member, your kind of role and responsibilities related to school funding.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for being here. I think the role of a board member can sometimes be misunderstood by many, but it's something that I've come to really understand fundamentally. I came from other experiences on commissions, planning commission, community formation commission, that were very in the weeds. So it was very hard for me to come to terms with what the role of the school board member is. But fundamentally, what the role of the school board member, it's of governance and it's of oversight. Our job is not to develop a budget line by line. That's the role of the superintendent, our administrative staff, and site leadership to really go line by line and try and assess what our needs are. Our responsibility as a board is to make sure that that budget aligns with our strategic goals and the needs of our students. And the board does that in a few ways. So we set priorities, hearing from the community. Our local control and accountability plan that you heard about is one way that we do that. And really having a clear-eyed look at student outcomes, student-centered outcomes. Next, we approve the budget, and not just as a rubber stamp. We vet it in public hearings, and many public hearings. We've had so many public hearings on the budget this past year. Asking hard questions, debating the trade-offs. And if you've read an article, you've watched a meeting, you attended a hearing, you've seen us do just that the last few months, and we're going to continue to do that. And lastly, the board has a responsibility to ensure transparency and accountability, both to the state, but also, and more importantly, to our local community. And we do all those things, we fulfill those roles and responsibilities, all while navigating the really complex terrain and external forces that are there. Anything from rising fixed costs to really unpredictable tax revenues. And through it all, and I mean, you mentioned it, but in the last 100 days, it's become clear that unpredictable federal decisions and what that's going to mean, it's already affecting how we're planning here locally for school districts like our own, and it's going to continue to affect school districts like ours. So through all that, we have to stay focused and make sure that every dollar is used to support student learning and well-being. And I can say as a board, we are committed to equity, fiscal responsibility, and student-centered outcomes. But I can also say those principles are constantly tested by real-world constraints. And a couple come to mind. So long-term sustainability. Dr. Maldonado talked about how we are basically spending into a deficit. Our reserve is declining. And so as we're planning our budgets and we're looking at the terrain, we're looking at tariffs, we're looking at just everyday expenses are more expensive. We have rising pension and benefit costs. Something that I'm really proud is that we contributed more to benefits, but I think all of us experience this in our jobs is benefits from one year to the next are just getting more expensive. And so that coupled with many other factors, it's forcing districts like ourselves to make really tough decisions. I think the next thing that comes to mind is recruitment and retention. We all know how expensive Santa Barbara is. It's getting harder and harder to recruit and retain employees, our educators and our staff. And compensation absolutely is a moral issue, but we also need to acknowledge it's also a budgetary one. And so districts like ours are actually entering into arenas that we never thought we would ever be in. We are going to provide deed-restricted affordable housing on school district land for our educators and our staff. We're trying to pull on every lever possible to make sure that we keep the talented educators we have serving our students now, but we also can recruit the promising young educators who can serve our students for many years to come. So all while doing that, we also have to ensure that our most underserved students, whether they're English learners, students with disabilities, or those experiencing poverty, I'm gonna steal your line, that they get what they need from whom they need it, when they need it, and they don't just get what's left over. And so budgets are value statements, and we hear this time and time again, and the reason why we hear it is because it's true. And the board's role is to make sure that those values reflect our community and our shared vision for what public education is. So even with the challenges that we've spoken about tonight, I sit here and I tell you that I am deeply optimistic. And I make the argument that you should be too. I've seen our schools innovate. We are launching wellness centers. We're expanding dual language immersion programs. We're making meaningful progress on early literacy. And we're strengthening partnerships for mental health programs as well. Our educators and our students continue to be resilient and creative, even in difficult times like these. And for me, that gives me a lot of hope. So I was asked to give a call to action. And so we really can't do this without you all. And I ask that you stay engaged, that you show up to events like this, show up to other events, support our school events for our kids. That if you can, you donate and support Santa Barbara Ed Foundation. Budgeting is where values meet reality. And I think whether you're a parent, a student, an educator, or a neighbor, your voice matters. So attend one of our hearings. Look at our LCAP. Give public comment. Help us shape a budget that works for all of our community, but especially our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. I appreciate that. I would just add one thing to that. If you can, I would encourage you to grab a visitor badge and go to one of the high schools in our area and see what's going on there. It's miraculous. So really impressive programs, really impressive things happening, really impressive students. If you were at our Hope Awards, you saw 2 students, and I was just amazed at how well they were just presenting the information they were. And so I would just encourage you to do that just to see what's going on in the community. So, Pedro, if you can take the selfish part right now and talk about our organization.
So one of the reasons we wanted to put this together is because mutually, over the course that I've been at the Education Foundation, we've gotten a lot of questions. And the questions have been, what is your role? What is the role of the district? What do you really fund? What do you feel as a gap, right? And so we've had sort of this ongoing conversation, and tonight is to sort of begin to address those questions, right? And to actually clarify, what do we do? What's our capacity? And sort of where do we fill a gap, right? I think when you listen to Hilda, she mentioned unrestricted fund. Well, if you look at the total budget that we have at the Santa Barbara Education Foundation, we're like less than 1% of the total amount of money that the district has. So our ability to really make a huge impact really totally depends on where we want to fill that little gap, right? And over the course of the time that the Education Foundation has existed, we've stepped up. In many cases, we have prevented program cuts or stepped up when arts programming took a hit at the state level, right? And those were the first things to go. So the Education Foundation stepped up and did that. We provided supplemental funding for programs and innovation, right? We're actually currently working on an innovative program that we're hoping takes a good route, which is to put volunteers in the classroom to help with reading. We're doing that with Partners in Education with Chelsea Duffy, who's in the audience. We've also stepped up when the district wanted to do a parcel tax or a bond. We have led those efforts as well because we have the ability to do that outside of what the district is able to do. And as we move forward, one of the things that we wanted to do as an education foundation that I think will be sort of a response to what the district is doing and to align with the district is doing is that now we have a new strategic plan. And in our strategic plan, our new strategic plan, we have 3 very broad goals that we want to support the district in, which is math, literacy, and student engagement. That student engagement piece is the music piece that we've always been involved in that a lot of people know the Education Foundation for. But we did that because we wanted to be able to support the district in the most basic ways that students are challenged in their education. We also want to do more of this. This is another role that I think education foundations have always played, which is to engage the community and to have the community play a role in ownership of what happens in the district. As Gabe just mentioned, one of the roles that you could play is to be more engaged with both the district and the Education Foundation through opportunities like this. And that, I think, fosters a sense of community and it fosters a sense of ownership around our public schools. And that's the only way we're going to kind of move forward, especially when we have gaps in funding. One of the other things I wanted to mention too is that as we move forward as an education foundation, we also want to have the flexibility to rapidly respond to needs in the district. And that's one of the things that we want to play a role and we want to continue to do that. So when Hilda and I had conversations and we're thinking, oh, we should definitely have volunteers in the classroom. That was actually at a board meeting that Hilda brought that up. And then Chelsea at the same board meeting mentioned, well, we've always done work with volunteers. Well, why don't we work on that? What was a quick response to a need? So I wanted to put all that out there to say we as an education foundation have a role moving forward. We want to continue to support the district and what they're doing. We also want to have some flexibility in terms of what we do. We continue to be supportive of what we've always done, which is around music education. We're about to start our summer camps for music, which are drumline, strings, band camp, and sound waves, which are for the little ones. I'm gonna take this off because it keeps falling off. So I just want to say all of that to say we want to be in a role where we are supportive of the district and continue to fill that gap. But the more you all are able to support us, the more we're able to fill those little gaps so they're not just focused on the little pieces, but they're focused on a little more broader pieces that we would like to impact student outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to open it up to some questions. So if anybody has a question.
Bennett, you said that 2/3 of California school districts are in decline. Does anybody want to speak to why that you think that may be?
I cannot remember what the report cited if there is the reasons, but it's very common throughout the state. I think there's birth rate issues for sure. A lot of folks were speculating for a while that people were leaving the state, and that was true for a period of time, but actually California's population now is increasing again. So I just think folks are having fewer kids in a lot of places. So, and there's also migration issues of where people are choosing to move to. Like Hilda mentioned, folks moving from here to the Inland Empire. We're hearing sort of out of economic necessity, folks are sort of migrating in interesting ways right now.
When we looked at it for our board report we did about 8 months ago, we did see decline in birth rates. And I think we got some data from Cottage Hospital about that too. So declining births are a real thing for us. I know that TK helps because we're getting younger kids in earlier, so that adds to the enrollment in our school district. And the cost of living is another one, at least here. It's a real issue for families, especially when we were doing the work around the housing and asking our employees, would you be interested in us developing workforce housing, and for how many people? You know, do we need like a bunch of single 1-bedroom studio apartments, or do we need 2, 3 bedroom? And most people that answered really talked about 2, 3 bedrooms. So we're talking about family people, and typically people in education tend to be more family oriented. And then we also asked about combined household income. So even with combined household income, they don't make it to the average median income to qualify. So they qualify in low status even for people with 6-figure salaries. Because when you look at the average median income in Santa Barbara and the cost of living, it's just beyond a lot of people's means, and especially those with families.
And people aren't having as many kids as they used to, and they're waiting longer, and a lot of folks aren't going to have kids, as well. I can remember even years ago, Chancellor Henry Yang was telling me he was recruiting Nobel Prize winners, and laureates, and he always hoped that they would sign the contract before they went out to look at housing. Like if they came out with spouse and family and looked at housing, he said they got half the house that would stay at Purdue.
Actually, if I can add, that's a real thing. We've had teachers sign contracts and then beg their way out of it because they can't find housing. So our workforce development initiative is really great to help us attract. I also know that some are doubled up. We've had teachers tell us that they live in garages, so it's difficult to be a teacher, and they tend to be the higher paid people compared to all the other employees we have. And you can see on the breakdown, we have about half and half of each.
Any other questions?
I would just go on that. Thinking about the environmental impact of lower birth rate and all of those kind of things, that's a good thing, right? It's not terrible to have less people, but for the school district, that's bad because you're getting less money. Is that correct? Because it's based on daily average?
Yes and no, because we're community funded, but that means less teachers.
But your point is, yes, we fund based on the number of students. Generally, it is different in a community funded district, but Santa Barbara's gone in and out of basic aid status over the years. So depending on what happens going forward, it could be back.
State's lost population the last decade. For the first time in the history of our state, 1850, first time ever, we lost a congressional seat. And I just saw a projection. I said, I don't know if you saw it. There's some demographics are saying compared to the rest of the country, we may lose 3 seats for next year. And that has big implications in terms of the presence in DC. Little things like the electoral college vote, and these 3 are going to, the Texas, the Florida, red states, kind of thing. So I know this is not partisan, but that's the kind of thing that gets your attention.
Yeah.
I spent last week in DC lobbying on some of these issues. And Hilda mentioned special ed. The law is 40% of your costs and 13% for special ed. That's pretty high. You know what that says? You're doing a good job on special, and more kids with IEPs are going to want to come here. But 40%, and what is it now, around 10 maybe less than 10%. We did better under former President Bush and Clinton than we're doing today, even under Biden and current.
I think I just add one more thing, practically speaking, for a school district like ours, is with declining enrollment, you then are put in a position to have discussions about potentially closing schools as well and consolidating schools. And I wouldn't be surprised, I'm saying this, I'm speculating, but I wouldn't be surprised if Santa Barbara Unified is having that conversation at some point in the near future.
Well, and like you said, it's that transition of moving grade levels between secondary and elementary too.
I just wanted to quickly add one piece too that just came to mind. My former workplace, First Five, they get their funding based on a formula that's on tobacco revenue and birth rates. So guess what's happening to them? Less smoking, less babies, less revenue. So that impacts the work that's being done in early care and education and preparing kids' school readiness. So that has implications as well. So I think that I just want to throw that out there too, because that's a big one too. Less smoking is good. Always wanted to do that. But the work part is bad.
Frank?
I would like to thank the 5 panelists because it's very important for all of us to know past, present, and future school funding issues so we can relate to what the future may hold for public education. But I particularly want to thank the superintendent and her staff who put together the information that you will be taking home with you. I hope that you share it with friends and colleagues, because it's my feeling parents, students, teachers are most concerned about how school districts allocate funds that are available for programs and services that meet student needs and interests. And I hope every school district and school board members keep in mind the public finances, public schools. Be sure you communicate with them on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. I have a quick question. It's probably for all of you, but probably for Jack and Barrett. But can you give us an example of an unfunded mandate and what kind of impact that might have on a school district?
Well, here the best example is TK. The best example here would be the TK, where the state's requiring you to provide this 4-year-old education. And since you're a community funded district, there's a little over 100 of them, what's the total, 130 or so, not giving you a nickel. And so that's an unfunded mandate. Other example?
Yeah, I mean, special ed's another big one, right? Big one, and then there's things that are sort of in a weird box like nutrition, where we're, the reimbursement for the costs of what you're actually having to pay for food and for all that isn't really a true amount. I would say, you're required to spend money on insurance and healthcare, and you're getting a COLA that's 2.3%. But I've been getting superintendents and folks have been sending me their healthcare bills, and they're going up between 12 and 25% in 1 year, just on the healthcare stuff, just this year that I'm seeing. Fire, insurance, cybersecurity. I mean, school districts all over the country are getting hacked and they're paying ransoms and they're having to file claims and they have for it. Who would have thought you have to have cybersecurity insurance, right? It's all just really expensive. So these are all things you have to do. You have to do them, but there's no funding specifically for them. I mean, I'll back way up, and this is a little bit of my soapbox, but in Sacramento, who controls all the money for schools, at the beginning of the year when they start the budget process, nobody at the Department of Finance or anywhere else sits down and says, okay, here's what the law says, here's what the federal law says, here's what the court cases say, here are all the things we gotta do. What does that cost? That's not what happens. It's the weirdest thing. Like when you cost anything else out, that's what you do. Then in California, we have this thing called Prop 98, and it spits out a big number. It's a big number. It's $180 $20 billion right now is what we're talking about. It's a lot of money. But they say that's $120 billion. Surely you can pay for all that stuff in that $120 billion bag of money. Well, what we know from research out of Stanford and other places is that we can't. And we're actually, when we ran those studies about 8 or 10 years ago, getting down to facts, the first one out of Stanford, they came back at that time. You were soup at that time, right? It was $75 billion underfunded. If you did all the things that you were supposed to do, Stanford said we're about $75 billion short. And I just talked to my colleague who's at Janelle Kubinik, who's at WestEd. And WestEd said they looked at this and they did an inflation factor on that. And she was basically unchanged. Even after all the COVID money that's gone into the system, we're just dramatically underfunded. And then you start running per pupil amounts and comparing to other states and stuff, and you kind of start to see it. But it all gets masked in the way we fund schools in California, unfortunately. It's disconnected. But anyway, sorry, it was my soapbox a little bit.
Chelsea?
Barrett, I think you mentioned other states being able to, they have other ways to generate revenue. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fundamental difference in other states is that in California, through a series of court cases and Prop 13 and some other things, we've created this system where Sacramento controls the money for schools throughout the state. They have to essentially use their authority in Sacramento to even things out, to size up some court cases. In other states, in most states, it's local boards have the authority to raise their revenue to pay their bills. They can put things on the ballot to raise local property taxes or whatever to pay the bill, to pay the, we want to pay our teachers more money, so we're going to put some on the ballot and ask voters in our community to support that. Very limited ability to do that here in California because of Prop 13 and interactions. I mean, you can do parcel taxes, but to pass a parcel tax in this state, you got to do 2/3 vote. It's very difficult politically to get that, and even in liberal areas. I mean, it's not a practical thing. And the amount of money you can raise through a parcel tax is generally, for a lot of districts, it's. I mean, otherwise you're asking folks to pay a lot of money on their property. So it's just, we have weird dynamics here. So we have this anemic funding, and then you compare to other states where they've got just a different funding model that's locally driven in most cases.
Go ahead, Adrienne.
So I know this is a nonpartisan forum, but I'd be interested to hear kind of all of your perspectives on what you think the implications of kind of this dismantling of the Department of Education and how you see that trickling down here, and then also just how you see that as sort of a shift in priorities and what you think the implications of that are going to be for us here in Santa Barbara. Just a couple minutes.
We get 30 seconds.
I'll start. So I work in the higher ed space too, and then I serve on the board. I think the higher ed space is actually in a lot more trouble than TK through 12. It's a far easier argument for him to make nationally to take funding away from woke institutions than it is to take it away from kids. But that's not to say there's not effects to the policies dismantling the Department of Education. It means that there's going to be less enforcement from the Office of Civil Rights. There's going to be a lot less technical support and just support in general for our special ed students. And then you look at things like tariffs and other economic policies that just make things more expensive. And you're talking about budgets that are really, we're working in the margins, really. And so I think personally, I'm paying attention to this a lot. But what I'm seeing so far is the Department of Ed and the supports from the Department of Ed are going to be far fewer and far less efficient. And I'm really worried about the higher ed space. So I'm interested to hear what everyone else has to say.
Well, I'm going to quote my other board member, Bill Banning. During COVID, we were fully funded by the federal government by an extra $66 million. And that's what fully funding looks like. And that money's gone. And there's more of it to go away. So I'm concerned about, in the latest round of cuts, two areas. One is English learners. So there is a pot of money that we do get for students like myself who don't arrive speaking English and need to learn it. It's functional English, we definitely need to have it. So that money is going away. And we use a lot of that money to provide supports like dual language and just learning the language and being academically successful. The other thing that they did with some of the latest round was to increase more money to charter schools, which means it's an attack on public education in and of itself. You just can't say it any other way. And of course, we think our charter school partners are great, but at the same time, it just takes more money from public schools. Those are the two immediate things. The special has already been unfunded long before and continues to be unfunded. We probably will see more around that area. And then, of course, the Office for Civil Rights. That's an office that's really about, when we think about whose voices are not coming into the room, which is something that we do a lot and we care about in Santa Barbara Unified, is which parents aren't here because they have two jobs or they can't access the information that we have. We have translators, but for the most part, who are the people most impacted by these decisions that can't be at the table to advocate for themselves? And those are the people that are going to hurt the most. So we're really taking away from people who already have less.
I'm not going to repeat everything that everyone said because I agree with everyone. I also worry about all the other departments that impact education, Health and Human Services, Department of Agriculture. All of those have a role in education, from food lunch programs to early care and education to Head Start. All of that is an impact on education. So I would just say, as much as I worry about the most vulnerable, which both Hilda and Gabe talked about, I worry about it coming from multiple directions, put it that way.
Yeah, and it's not healthy for education. And to totally eliminate will take an act of Congress, because Congress created it in 1979, President Carter, and Trump announced he wanted to close it like the same week that we're burying President Carter, but with different reasons. And Gabe is spot on again. It's higher ed. Kevin Gordon, one of our other founding partners, who I did look at my notes earlier, who will be here with Abe Hajela, the attorney in our office, who has defended more Prop 98 lawsuits than anybody all the way to Supreme Court. They'll be here doing a budget workshop on May 30th up at Susan Salcido's office. I mean, Kim always comes, yeah. But it's free, it's available, so feel free to come. But where Gabe's right is on higher ed. Kevin went to see the White House. He always is good at tracking down decision makers. And he found this, do you remember the guy's name? I forgot. It's the guy, Eric Bledsoe. And he's kind of underwater, out of the main, you won't see him on TV. He apparently is really calling the shots on education policy. It's not the secretary, it's not McMahon. And he's writing the memos. And he has a great title, Special Assistant to the President. And he told Kevin the first week of February, we're not going to cut special ed. We're not going to cut Title I. We may block grant them, but we're not going to cut them. We don't want those fights. And this is February 1st. And I'd be watching the talking heads on the news, the Democrats, a lot of my friends, I just had lunch with some of them last week. And that their pitch is, he's going to cut special ed, he's going to cut Title I. But he's not. He's going after higher ed. And he told Kevin, he knew the exact numbers. Special ed's 18 billion and Title I is 16 billion, or vice versa. But he said your higher ed Pell Grant is 1.6 trillion with a T. He said that's where we're going. That's the savings we're going to get. And so the budget that they just put out shows about a 15% reduction. And they're leaving the sexy programs, the ones that you can generate a lot of support for, alone. Smart political play, and going after higher ed big time. And then they'll transfer some of these responsibilities to other agencies. The nutrition stuff will go to Health and Human Services, and that's where it was before 1979. And then the legal stuff, and special ed will go back to Health and Human Services. The nutrition stuff will go to Ag, and that's why you want to have a relationship with the Department of Ag, and Kevin does back there. And then all the legal stuff will go to the Department of Justice. Well, that's going to get so lost there. That's not a top priority for them. And some of the cases that come out of not just California, but some of the other states where there are really blatant violations of civil rights for students that don't look like most of us, I mean, that's where you're going to really see the absence being felt. So those are going to be the impacts.
Yeah, today Bill Gates announced that he was going to sunset his foundation in 20 years. And the good news is that will reflect billions of dollars going into international health issues. And it's wonderful, but then it'll be gone. My question for Jack and Barrett is because I'm in philanthropy, there are pros and cons of putting philanthropic private money into public schools. Are there examples, where do you feel are the best areas for where can private funding support public education right now? And what are the caveats or what are the things that we should be concerned about when private funds start picking up where schools can't fund certain programs?
I'm sure you've got thoughts, but I'll do mine first. I would say, and I spoke to a group of a philanthropic group recently, and so you teed this up. I mentioned the getting down to facts research from 2008. It was late before 2010. That hasn't really been touched again, and it's the question about what does it cost to actually run public education to meet the needs of all kids? What does that actually cost? Because we don't, in California, sort of back to my soapbox, we don't actually make that assessment. We just push a bunch of money out the door and say, do your best with that, what you got. What does it look like to pay teachers livable wages in all the places in California, including Santa Barbara and the Inland Empire and everywhere else? What does that cost? What does it cost to give everybody health care, to meet the needs of students, to provide mental health support, to provide nutrition, to provide the whole thing? If philanthropy could wrestle that assessment for policymakers, I think well-funded research with Stanford and or others to revisit that issue, I think would be really, really impactful, because I think that would have the greatest impact. The state isn't looking at that right now. I think it's a void that needs to be filled.
And it's to the point that Barrett's made twice now. I'll try to even simplify it a little bit more. It's a basic philosophy of government and how you want to fund things. Do you say this is our existing tax structure, and so whatever money comes in, we're going to match it and do what we can for programs? Or do you do what the Getting Down to Facts study said? Let's try to calculate the actual level of cost, the types of programs, the class sizes we want, the career tech opportunities, the computers, the textbooks, fill in the blanks, and then try to adjust the tax structure to fund that. And which way we do it. Here's the tax structure, how much money's coming in. And when we hit a recession, guess who gets hit extra hard? People dependent on the state. And schools, ever since 1978, have been dependent there. But the foundation committee has done a great deal. When I was state superintendent, I remember meeting with the Gates people, and my former chief deputy, close friend, and he used to live in Santa Barbara, but his wife in my office here, Gavin Payne, he became the top guy in Gates. He lasted 3 years. I helped negotiate the contract for him afterwards, and the final issue was, well, which Washington is Gavin going to live in? And Gavin lived in Davis, and his kids were in school, and he said, I'll get on a plane every Monday morning, I'll come home every Friday night. That lasted 3 years, which was about 2 years longer than I thought he would. But they did a great job when I was state sup on smaller schools. They were convinced that was the way to go. And I had a nice lunch with Melinda Gates and her 15 security people, in a locked room in San Francisco, someplace with no windows, but just the 16 of us. And she was big on investing in teachers. How can we help prepare teachers? And she said, we're looking for one-time, investments, not setting something up where if we lose interest, you guys are hung. So, they get that. They're smart folks, and they've made a significant contribution.
Can I just add one thought to that? And Matt, I think you touched on it, is having things that make kids want to go to school every day also, I think, is a place where foundations and that can really be added in. And you guys are doing that hard work of making sure they're learning to read and write and do those things. But we need them to want to be there first. So like the when you did the literacy luncheon and raise money for books and school gardens, I'll make the plug for it. But doing those things and the art programming that make the kids want to be there so that they have the rest of these services is really important, I think. And you said, like, there's incredible things going on in these high schools, and we need those kids to want to be there to participate
Like
in it.
the arts and athletics.
Yep.
2 more A's for you.
That's right. It's academics, arts, athletics, and activities, and clubs. So that's right. Thank you.
We're going to close this this event tonight. You can obviously ask questions. They're stuck. There's only one way to get out. No, I'm joking. But you can ask questions of anybody. I just want to thank you guys for coming this evening. We hope to have more of these kind of events in the future around similar topics. I want to thank our panel. This was a great opportunity for us. It was great to take advantage of you guys and your expertise, especially at the state level. And I want to thank our local school board reps and our reps. There's 2 of them here. And Hilda and Pedro as well for being here to represent the foundation. So thank you guys. Hope to see you again.